Welcome to episode 507 of the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. I am Dave Deken, and have we got a great episode for you? Because today we're talking about the stuff that can quietly rob your herd of performance and profit: flies, ticks, and parasites. Our guest is Dr. Jonathan Cammack, Oklahoma State University's Extension Specialist for Livestock Entomology and Parasites, and he covers everything from cattle to horses to goats, sheep, pigs, and poultry. Basically, if it's livestock and it's got a pest problem, Dr. Cammack is your guy. We'll kick off this conversation that we recorded at the Central Oklahoma Cattle Conference at the Payne County Expo Center in Stillwater, and we're going to dig into screwworm concerns to Asian longhorned ticks showing up in Oklahoma, and more importantly, what it means for producers. And of course, as always, you will find all of the resources and links from today's episode, plus past episodes on our website, reddirtagronomy.com. But first, as always, we start with a quick trip around the table for an introduction to the dream team of dirt and everything that grows from it. Let's start with Oklahoma State University's Extension Precision Nutrient Management Specialist.
We should piece that B-roll together, and just between Josh and I start just hours of wrong introductions.
Dr. Brian Arnall. And next to him is Oklahoma State University Extension Cropping System Specialist.
Sometimes not wrong, just really weird ones.
Dr. Josh Lofton. Let's kick off our conversation with Dr. Jonathan Cammack that we recorded on February 13th, 2026 at the Central Oklahoma Cattle Conference in Stillwater. So, without further ado, on to the episode. You are listening to the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. We are at the Central Oklahoma Cattle Conference here in Stillwater at the Payne County Expo Center, and special thanks to the Payne County Extension Office for having us come out and participate over here. It's kind of nice. We're off to the side. We're not there. There are other vendors around, and pretty good showing for the event today. You can hear Dr. Darrell Peel in the background talking
the golden
about
tones of
yes,
Dr. Darrell Peel.
Yes. Talking about the wonderful cattle prices and the outlook and all of that. And then there's those of us that were wanting to get into the industry, and we're just going to sit to the side and wait for prices to come back down.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Josh, you want to go ahead and introduce our guest here?
Yeah. So somebody we've tried to pin down, but he's in a different building as us. So I mean, it's impossible to know if he's there or not unless we actually just walk over there. But Jonathan's here. He's our state. Well, he's got a longer title than I'm going to give him, and he can say his full title because I already don't remember it. But he's our livestock entomologist.
So basically, you took over for Justin Talley.
Okay,
Awesome.
Jonathan. Actual title now.
Yeah.
I am the State Extension Specialist for Livestock Entomology and Parasitology.
See, this is why that is why I couldn't remember it.
A lot of words.
But it's a pretty big job too, though. So I mean,
Yeah, with cattle being kind of the number one commodity in the state,
right?
That occupies most of my time. But I'm livestock, so cattle, chickens, pigs, goats, horses, sheep. I mean, everything that classifies under livestock. The pest control or pest management associated with those is kind of under the purview of my position.
Right.
So you called it pests. So I would assume there was somebody that deals with things like, bird flu and stuff like that, or does that fall under you as well?
But before we get into that, as far as pests go, what can we do as far as Josh? Sorry, I'll take your answer off the air. Go ahead. Bird flu.
Yeah, so bird flu is really outside of my area. Now, with some of the pathogens that we might have associated with livestock, there are certainly insects or other arthropods that could be the vectors of those, which is where I would come in. But in terms of managing the diseases themselves, that's a bit outside of what I do.
So if you want to think like our fellow entomologists that we work on, it's basically kind of what they work on, just on animals. So lots of ear tags.
Ear tags.
You've done a lot of ear tagging
and fly strips, and spraying things around barns. So trying to manage pests on and around where we keep our animals.
So I know the question's coming.
Yeah.
But I want to answer, or I want to ask a more fun question. Did your fly colony survive Christmas?
2 of them did, yes.
Two colonies or two flies?
Two colonies,
Okay.
2 species. One species that was kind of taking a dive, maybe around Thanksgiving or so, continued to do so through December, and we lost it. So waiting for the weather to warm back up continuously so we can get that species back in colony.
Yeah, so I always get updates from his better half on we have to get back from College Station because Jonathan's got a fly colony that we need to make sure is not dead yet.
Oh,
so.
she didn't throw her leaf hoppers under the bus,
Oh, she does that as well,
yeah.
but I think she is always holding the fly colony first. The fly colony comes first. So what are you doing? So you're raising a couple of different species, you said. So why are we raising species or colonies of a couple of different species of flies?
So we have a species. We have a species of blowfly, which is one of our metallic green flies that's a decomposer, and then we also have houseflies, and we use them for a number of different things. A lot of times, pesticide trials, that industry companies might want us to try against them. It's kind of the main reason we keep them, but also we use them for other experiments in the lab to do different tests on and like some behavior type research and things like that.
So it's really, why you all, entomologists in general keep colonies is just so you're not having to rely on natural populations just showing up,
right?
And you can actually get something done and get things done probably a lot more efficiently and effective rather than if you're waiting on these natural colonies to show up.
Yep, exactly. And we think about something like houseflies. They're present basically year round, but when it's really cold, like it has been for the past month or so, they're hard to find. It doesn't mean that they're not here. We just can't go out and catch them. So it allows us the opportunity to be able to do research on them during the periods of the year where the weather isn't conducive to finding them outside.
When you say colony, what size is a colony? Are we talking 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000? What's a 1,000? That's tens of hundreds. Okay.
I couldn't put a number on how many are in the cage, but we have these cages that are probably 12 to 16 inches square that we put the flies into. We give them water, sugar, powdered milk, things they need to be able to live. Then we collect eggs from them and raise those larvae and just kind of keep feeding that colony, to keep it alive until we need some of those individuals for whatever studies we need to do on them.
That's fascinating and horrifying all at the same moment.
Right.
So if you're raising these in colonies outside of natural systems, if you will, does that shift any of the ecology, biology, physiology of those insects compared to what we might experience in a feedlot or just happenstance out in the world?
Yeah, certainly. It does change their behavior, and we've essentially created a genetic bottleneck by putting a certain number of flies into a box and having them reproduce with one another. So in terms of genetic diversity, it's a much lower gene pool than what we would experience out in the wild. But we do periodically collect flies from out in the environment to put into that colony. That way we can keep their genetic diversity up so that we can kind of mitigate some of those potential issues with establishing them into a colony.
So if you're looking at an array of chemicals, let's say you're looking at ear tags and you have 10 different active ingredients on these things or something along those lines, and then you kind of isolate one or two that are really good, do you then have to go and field test just to kind of make sure that them in that natural ecosystem that it works the same as it did in a controlled, or are you pretty confident outside it gets that controlled that it's going to work in that natural ecosystem too?
Well, so luckily with ear tags, we don't do a lot of the kind of preliminary laboratory type work. The companies that produce those products do that, and usually when we get contacted for doing some pesticide work, it's probably very similar to what y'all do. A company's already got a few target products, that they think work really well under their conditions, but they need to test it on another population. So they'll reach out to livestock entomologists around the country and say, hey, do you have a colony of this species or a colony of this species? We need to get some kind of outside data to see how these products perform on that species. And so we'll do testing like that. Now, if we're talking about ear tag testing, usually, since we're dealing with like on animal stuff, that's got to be, have approval through EPA and FDA and all of that. And so usually when we're doing ear tag tests, it's just with commercial products that are already available. That way we can get field data in actual field conditions in a certain portion of the country.
So even having that very narrow genetics is potentially positive because maybe there's zero overlap with somebody else's population. So
right.
Even though you might have very narrow, that's one of the reasons why they come look for you, is because you have something that just doesn't seem to ever overlap with what they have.
Correct. Yeah, and yeah, it's interesting that you just brought up the genetic part of it. I know I said it earlier, but I've also got a beetle that we work with. It's a big pest in poultry production, and I do have a colony of them that is what we consider to be a susceptible population. And so our colleagues that are in the kind of chemical industry type of business, they want to test their products against this susceptible strain, but also against field strains that we know are resistant to a lot of compounds.
So I've got a lot. I'm going to jump in because you're running the show, Josh. So how do we...
Just doing what he normally does on these things.
I know, and I'm taking back over. No, how do you keep the... So, like the beetles, right, that are a pest, how do you keep them? What's the containment of those things? Especially if you're to bring something in that maybe wasn't susceptible, how do you have to manage containment to make sure that it doesn't get out into the local population?
Right. So we have for this particular beetle species, they're very easy to raise. We would just keep them in some sort of plastic box, essentially like the big like plastic containers that you might store stuff in your garage. We just keep them in those with screened lids on them, and we've got a different color box for the field population versus the susceptible one. That way we don't have any genetic crossing between those two.
I guess, okay, so you get asked to run a trial. You run a trial. You got these populations. You're babysitting these things. These are your offspring, if you will. How big of a hit does just a normal trial take to your population, and how long do you have to kind of rebuild that population before you can do something like that again?
Usually we try to plan for that a little bit. Like, if I know that I've got an experiment that's going to be coming up, say like in a month, we'll do everything we can to kind of boost the numbers in that population. That way, when we start diverting some of those individuals over to the test, we don't have that hit that you're talking about to the numbers and keeping that colony going.
So you basically always have this colony that if something comes up,
right,
a crazy pest comes out of nowhere and we want to test some chemicals, you always have a good sustained population.
Yep.
You might have to rebuild from that, but that's an emergency situation. But you almost always has that population to emergency.
At least once a week we're collecting eggs from each one of these species that we're keeping going. That way we always have a steady population, and when we have experiments going, we'll increase that number of collections. That way we can account for those individuals that we need.
So how many insects do you put into a trial? Or is it just, let's try to get 30 of them? Do we try to get 100 of them, or do you just have a container ready and just put the trial into that?
It really depends.
Yeah.
It's all kind of up to discussions with whoever those companies are.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes we try to mimic the same sort of lab studies that they do in-house. That way the results are as comparable as possible, and the only difference is the kind of genetics of that colony that
right,
we're using in the conditions of the space that we're in. But we try to do everything as close as possible to kind of eliminate some of the
right,
potential variability.
He does it how you cook, Dave. He just kind of dumps that bucket and kind of goes.
Just knock it a couple times.
That'll be right.
Yeah.
So, I've done a lot of insect counts on plants and stuff. How's that? I mean, and a lot of those aren't necessarily flying. We do have some, but you're talking about flies. How are you in a research environment counting flies on cows? How is it qualitative?
This is cool.
Yeah, it's a little qualitative and a little quantitative, right? We try to do both. So we'll go out into the field. We do this at certain times of the day when the weather's nice, when the sun's at a good angle, right? That way we can see the animals, and we do visual counts. So we just estimate how many flies might be on the side of that animal. Okay. And I also try to take a photograph to go along with that, so that I've got something that I can document with it. And then the student workers that are in the lab, they get the fun task of going through on ImageJ and clicking on all the flies and stuff. So,
that's horrible.
I just want to know, on a data sheet, have you ever wrote "that's a lot of flies" and then just called it good at that?
Is there a crap ton? Is that a box?
Yeah, it's usually like 2,000 plus, and then because at that point it's just like, I don't know how many are there.
Ish. But them's a lot of flies right there.
Failure.
So one of the big parasites or flies that's in the news a lot lately, the screwworm.
Right.
Kind of take us through why it is a big deal, and where are we with the location of that?
Yeah, so screwworms are a fly. They're a blowfly, so they're related to our decomposers, the metallic blue and green ones that we typically see associated with carrion, trash, things like that. They're a little different than our normal blowflies. Most blowflies are decomposers eating that rotting tissue. Screwworms are obligate parasites, so they have to feed on a living animal. So
okay.
We have a cow out in a pasture, for example, that gets a cut, a nick from a barbed wire fence or something, and since they're not walking around with Band-Aids and Neosporin, that cut's probably going to get infected somewhat.
Yeah.
If the flies are in the environment, they're going to smell the smells the bacteria in that infected wound are producing, and they're going to lay their eggs around that wound.
Okay.
Those larvae are going to hatch, burrow into that wound, and then start eating the tissue.
How long does that part of it take?
Which part?
The burrowing in and then start eating.
Oh, yeah. So the eggs are going to hatch in probably 12 to 24 hours, depending on temperature. So it's pretty fast.
Yeah.
And they're going to be tiny little first instar larvae at that point. They're going to be, maybe a millimeter,
Yeah.
2 millimeters in length at that point. But they're going to hard to see. But the damage they can cause is pretty substantial from there.
On the damage side, and because I don't feel like I've seen a lot of news on the screwworm, we got to keep the screwworm out. What is that damage? Does it actually keep the carcass from being able to be sold? Does it lower the quality of the carcass?
It kills the carcass.
So it depends on where that infection happens, how soon it's caught, things like that. So there's some pretty, I would say, more widely used photos that USDA has from some Hereford bulls from back in the 60s, and basically like one side of the head of that animal is gone because they had a cut in the flies. In that instance, that animal's probably going to die from those larvae feeding on it. Now, if we're on talking about a more muscular portion of the body and the infestation, there's that's I'm pretty sure that's the photo right there. Yep.
Yeah, but is that carcass salvageable? Can I do something with that, or is there a toxin that's released with the fly? So I guess my question is, while that was on the head, that there's a lot of beef with that bull that could be ground. Is there a thanks, Dave. I don't want that right now.
I have more.
But so
Just
does that mean if
lunch then start?
So I guess
showing
my question is, if I saw a screwworm on a cow, is that cow immediately just gone? Like, I mean, the quality of the beef, I can't harvest it. Period. So the bigger part of that, or answer to that question, is that's a regulatory issue that I'm not able to to give an answer to, right? Because a lot of the states we're still trying to decide what our response is going to be if and when they get here.
So I know working in plants and working in insects, there's a couple of different categories that make it an issue. It either reproduces super fast, and it already sounds like it reproduces pretty fast. We don't have anything to control it, or it's impossible to get what we can control it to where those are. Where are we at besides, I guess, the first one of that? It reproduces pretty fast.
Right, so they develop pretty fast, and we have a good program for being able to manage them. I mean, despite what we're hearing in the news right now and over the past couple of years with this continued northward movement, the program that's been in place for managing screwworms has been effective for 50 to 75 years at this point. I mean, so it's been a long time, in the making, and the whole plan with that program was to use these sterilized releases of flies to push them south, kind of to Panama, where that permanent quarantine zone was, the skinniest part of the continent. That way, we've only got a small area within which we're trying to maintain kind of that barrier. Well, in 2023, they kind of escaped that barrier and have since been moving north, and Central America up into North America gets wider as you go north, so it becomes more and more challenging to be able to release those flies with the sterilized flies with how this program is run into that kind of wider portion of the continent.
Well, and if I remember correctly, the screwworm is actually quite common in South America,
right?
And they just deal with it.
Yeah.
And we were able to push it back, kind of to, like you say, that narrow landmass, and then control it that way. Are we going to be at a point where we just have to deal with it too, or do you think we can get it back under control in that direction?
Yeah, I think we'll get it back under control, but it's going to take a while. Right? Yeah. It's going to take some time. It took us 25 to 30 years to get it out of the United States. Because that program started back in the 50s and in the late 80s, early 90s is when we finally had it out of the United States for good. So it's going to take a while.
Wow.
So I guess the big thing, and I guess I've heard this either from since it doesn't feed on a festering or necrotic tissue. I mean, I guess that's the big issue, is that if you kick cows out on a range, they get scraped, they're going to get it, and you're not going to know until it probably gets to be a problem.
Right. So, this really comes down to kind of good management of our animals and in actually working with them, not just putting them out in a pasture and looking at them once a year.
Yeah.
I'm not saying look at them daily either, but we've got to find some middle ground between those two, whether it's, once every couple of days, once a week, just put eyes on all those animals to make sure that they are healthy and we don't have any issues.
Well, I remember, back when I was in Louisiana, is like, they cook them out onto the swamp, and then 6 months later they come and see them. I mean, that's just
that's not going to happen.
A non-thing anymore, because basically you might have a whole herd basically gone then at that point.
Is there an environment that the screwworm fly prefers? Is it a humid? Is it a dry? Or does it really not matter?
So warm and humid is kind of what they're after. And if we think about when in Oklahoma, for example, back when screwworms were present in North America, the United States, we always had them late spring, in the summer, and into early fall. So kind of April, May to October-ish. Because they're tropical, right? They need that warmth, and so as the temperatures would warm up in the spring and summer, their populations would move north from Mexico into Texas, into Oklahoma and Kansas, and then as temperatures would cool off in the fall, they would start to get pushed back south. So we would see these natural fluctuations north and south throughout the year.
Do you see them moving into the arid territories, like in the earlier times? Were they in New Mexico and Arizona?
Yeah.
So
New Mexico, Arizona, yeah.
Even though they're arid, it didn't. As long as it's warm enough, they were able to figure out.
Well, so is this? I guess maybe I don't keep up with this as much as other people do. Is this a big issue in our feedlots, or do we just lay eyes on them enough that we would see that happening quick enough?
Feedlots will be, an area of concern just because there are so many animals within that space, and there's more animals there, so it'll be harder to see all of them. But that's certainly a concern.
But have they gotten to that region yet? Because I know this has been an issue in Texas.
So they haven't made it into the U.S. yet. I guess we should have started with that.
So they're right
close.
there, close to Texas.
So we've got populations at probably 250 to 350 miles or so south of Texas, kind of in central Tamaulipas is where the population is kind of at. Now, we've had some cases get about 75 miles from southern Texas, but those are animals that were moved from known screwworm positive areas in kind of central Mexico and southern Mexico to a feedlot in northern Mexico.
Wow.
And that's the big problem, right? I mean, these flies can only move, maybe 5-10 miles over the course of their lifespan, but if we put a cow in a trailer, we can drive 500-600 miles in a day.
Yeah.
I guess that brings up this is big on Mexico. What is Mexico doing as far as their quarantine methods and trying to keep it? Because they want to keep it out of northern Mexico, I can only imagine.
Yeah, certainly. It's a big concern for the U.S., for Mexico, and all of the other countries between Mexico and Panama, where they've been experiencing this problem for the past 2 years or so. There are a lot of agencies that are working on this. A lot of federal entities that are all working together. So essentially USDA, and then the Mexican equivalent to that, and also a large collaborative group in Panama, all working together to get this under control.
Are there natural predators to this? Like, can we bring up the grackle population and just release them around Walmarts and stuff? And then
you're going to put the fear of God into Jason Warren, aren't you?
Yeah, kind of. But we'll get him a helmet. So
does he not like birds?
Doesn't like grackles.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, who does, right? Yeah.
But I don't know if there's like a natural predator that love the blowfly.
There are some things that eat them. Certainly some birds. There are some little tiny parasitic wasps that will lay their eggs in the larvae or the pupae and kill them, but they're not going to get everything.
Yeah.
And so that's where we have to step in and try to do something. And that's really where this kind of sterile insect technique, the process that's been in use since the 50s, is needed.
Yeah.
So I guess taking a step back from this, I mean, so I know a lot of the same basic principles kind of exist across. Doesn't matter if you're in crop production or animal production. But when we talk about like the issue with the sorghum aphid, it was man, it blew up so fast that our natural ecosystems, while we had a lot of good predators, just couldn't ever grow as fast as our pests did. So we had to bring in these other things to knock it back to where the natural predators come in. Is that kind of the situation we're in? Is that maybe naturally this can occur, but we have just too widespread and too large of a population festering that natural systems just can't keep up?
Well, so the issue, I mean, there's a biological difference between aphids and this fly. Most aphids are parthenogenetic, so they reproduce asexually. So we've got a female aphid that's going to lay eggs that are going to hatch. Don't have that added challenge in the environment of locating a mate. So they're just going to reproduce on the plant that they're on, which is one of the reasons why aphid populations explode the way they do, because they don't have that challenge. But with screwworms, their mating is one of the things that we're able to kind of take advantage of for how we manage them. So the sterile insect technique that is used is flies are mass-produced in a facility in Panama, and they are sterilized with a low dose of radiation. And this species of fly only mates once, and so what happens is they release sterilized male flies into the environment, and they overwhelm the population of natural males. That way the sterilized males are the ones that are mating with the females, and then when the females lay eggs, those eggs are infertile.
Wow.
So we just got to get in the right place at the right time, but that's been the issue.
Yeah, right place at the right time. So as this program was effective from the 50s and 60s, through the late 80s and early 90s, there were facilities in southern Texas and central Mexico that were producing these sterilized flies. But as we were effective at pushing those populations south, we didn't need to keep those facilities running further north, because it's probably hundreds of thousands of dollars a day, to run these facilities in some instances. And so those further north facilities shut down as we moved south. And that's been kind of the challenge that we're having to overcome right now. So there is a facility in Panama that's been running for a long time, and that's where all the sterilized flies are currently coming from at this time. But there is a facility in central Mexico that is essentially sterilizing fruit flies that are pests of agricultural crops, some like plant crops. And they're diverting half of the capacity of that facility over to raising screwworms, because they've got all the technology in place already for the sterilization process. They've just got to convert it over so they can raise a different kind of behavior and type of fly in that facility.
We've really focused on the livestock side of it. I mean, there are other animals out there.
He's a livestock specialist.
A livestock specialist.
I know. I'm just going to ask him to get general about it.
We focused on cows?
Cattle.
Okay.
But
the other things are still considered livestock, Dave.
But like a deer, is a deer livestock? Well, I guess it could be. But it is like the wildlife side of it. I mean,
he's a livestock.
Deer get.
Yeah, it is 100% a mammal issue.
Okay.
So dogs, cats,
that's what I was looking
deer,
for.
cows. I mean, we hear a lot about it because the impact that it's going to have on the cattle market, right?
Yeah.
Because we raise cattle in such large numbers out in the wild. So maybe commercial swine production is going to be a little safer because those pigs are raised essentially in climate controlled environments.
Right.
High biosecurity type of situations.
Yeah.
We don't have that for our cow-calf systems or our stockers or our feedlots.
So
they're open to the environment.
I was going to say if there's like a deer that has a cut on the border, 5 miles later there's a deer that has a cut. So hypothetically, it could come from the wildlife side of it while we're all focusing on the livestock side of it.
And all of the groups that are working on this are focusing across the spectrum, in terms of what animals we're dealing with.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
Well, and that's kind of the thing I was going to say is that you have these pronghorns and deer and stuff like that. That one, they are unregulated crossing borders,
right.
So it's we can control the cattle all we want to, but we could easily get movement of this even though the science is trying to handle everything, policy is also going across species, or are we mainly focused on the livestock from a policy standpoint?
It's across the board. I mean, we've got USDA, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and all the kind of state level entities of those that are all working together, kind of respectively within their areas. And it's interesting that you mentioned wildlife. The last time we had screwworms in the U.S. was in 2016 and 2017, and they were in a protected population of white-tailed deer in the Florida Keys.
In the U.S.
Yeah, in the U.S. And so they were noticed during the rut when these bucks were fighting with each other, for mating. And it's an endangered species of deer. They're called key deer. They're whitetails that are about 3 foot tall that have normal size antlers, and they're fighting with one another, and they're getting cuts on their heads and stuff. And in the Florida Keys and the islands that they live on, they're kind of like the pets to most of the people that live there. And so they have very close association with people, and so people started noticing these wounds on their heads that had these larvae living in them, and so that's how it got found.
So we focused, of course, a lot on flies and screwworm and stuff like that, but I'm sure you have other things that you want to talk about. So what are the other big concerns that maybe we might be missing, that because we're focusing so much on screwworm that we might be missing other places?
Yeah, so Oklahoma is uniquely positioned right now, which is both a good thing and a bad thing for my job, in terms of pests that we're talking about with livestock. We've got screwworms that are currently in Mexico that have been moving north for the past 2 to 3 years at this point.
These long pauses.
Yeah, Daryl had to get a drink, so he got quiet, so we all got quiet. Now he's speaking again.
So, but from the eastern side of the state, we've got the Asian longhorned tick was first found in northeast Oklahoma in the summer of 2024, and that's another big problem for our cattle markets, our cattle producers.
And those are asexual also, right?
They are asexual. Yeah. So like the aphids, that's why we're able to see their populations explode so quickly, because they don't have that added challenge of locating a mate in the environment. So that female Asian longhorn tick is going to take a blood meal off of a cow and drop off, in the leaf litter or something under a tree, lay a few thousand eggs, and then, those eggs are all going to be female, and they're not going to have a mate, to be able to reproduce, so populations can explode very rapidly.
One thing I've always been fascinated by is it's not necessarily the insect that causes the damage. They're just a carrier for the bacteria, for whatever, and that's actually what causes the issue with the livestock, the mammals, I guess, in general.
Yeah, so when we think about screwworms, I mean they're eating tissue, right?
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
Our biggest issue in livestock across most of the country are hornflies. They're blood feeding on the animals. They're not really transmitting any pathogens, but because they're taking that blood meal, each one of those hornflies is feeding about 40 times a day.
Right.
So they're biting the cow consistently. What is that? Twice an hour or something at least. And it's a massive amount of stress on the animals, and so they're diverting energy to get that fly off their back that's biting them rather than eating. But like you mentioned with this tick, they can occur in extremely high numbers on cattle, which is one of our main concerns because they're parthenogenetic. So we can see thousands of these on an individual cow, which can cause enough blood loss to actually kill that animal.
Yeah.
There have been documented cases of that.
Yeah.
But there's also a pathogen that they're able to vector to cattle that's highly pathogenic and something that we don't have a management method for.
Wow. That's amazing.
But luckily, we don't have that pathogen in Oklahoma yet. But it's in Arkansas, it's in Missouri, and it's in Kansas. And we have the tick in Oklahoma and all three of those states. So it's only a matter of time, unfortunately.
Ticking. Yeah.
So that's so we have something coming from the south and the east.
Yeah.
What about our guys out west?
Run to the west.
Yeah.
Run to the west.
We're just making everybody scared today.
Yeah, that's okay.
I know my talks are always like doom and gloom. When I get brought in to talk about screwworms and Asian longhorn ticks, but I mean I guess that's just the nature of the beast, right?
So are no big, outside of major, but growing concern for like a lot of our feedlot industry out west, or
not yet?
Of course we have the screwworm that I'm sure they're very concerned with, but currently in the United States that's an issue.
Yeah, nothing coming from.
We are safe from the west.
Yeah, nothing currently impending on the Panhandle or anything.
New Mexico's good too.
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
good.
Yeah,
okay.
New Mexico and Colorado are good. So.
Well, they got the drought, so
there's that. that's a different specialist.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming in and chatting with us and putting up with our dumb questions about.
I enjoyed it.
About all types of parasites. We really appreciate you coming in.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you for listening in on this conversation of the Red Dirt Agronomy Podcast. And if you'd like to join the next discussion, leave us a message on our website, reddirtagronomy.com. We would like to thank Dr. Jonathan Cammack for joining us on the podcast this week. And again, if you get a chance, visit our website, reddirtagronomy.com, to find out more information about our guests that we discussed today or previously on the podcast. For Dr. Josh Lofton and Dr. Brian Arnall, I am Dave Deken, and we all want to thank you for listening. The proceeding is a copyrighted recording of Agdal Media, LLC 2026. And yes, all rights are reserved.